The air in Iran is thick with tension, and the world is watching as a nation teeters on the edge of something monumental. The critical issue at hand is whether Iran is heading toward a full-scale revolution following its recent military confrontations and deepening internal crises. To properly assess this possibility, we must examine the severe structural weaknesses now undermining the Islamic Republic, the rapidly growing disillusionment among its population, and historical patterns that demonstrate how authoritarian regimes often collapse when they overextend militarily while failing to meet their citizens' most basic needs. What makes the current situation particularly volatile is that even the regime's staunchest supporters have begun openly questioning its decisions, marking a significant shift in Iran's political dynamics. These are not the usual reformist critics, but loyalists who have spent years defending the government's policies, and their sudden willingness to voice dissent suggests the regime's traditional mechanisms of control are breaking down. The human and strategic costs of Iran's recent conflicts have been devastating. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, the regime's most powerful military and political instrument, has suffered catastrophic losses that will take years to recover from, if recovery is even possible. Senior commanders, paramilitary leaders, and key strategists who form the backbone of Iran's regional influence network have been eliminated, leaving gaping holes in both military capability and institutional knowledge. These were not just soldiers, but the ideological enforcers who projected Iranian power through proxy militias across the Middle East, and their absence has left groups like Hezbollah and various Iraqi Shia factions suddenly vulnerable and questioning their alliance with Tehran. Compounding this crisis is the decimation of Iran's scientific and technological elite, whose expertise would be crucial for any meaningful reconstruction effort. The regime finds itself in the paradoxical position of having spent decades and billions of dollars building these networks of influence, only to see them severely degraded in a matter of days. This loss of manpower and expertise is not just a military setback, but a blow to Iran's ability to project strength, both at home and abroad. Iran's economic situation, already precarious due to years of sanctions and mismanagement, has now entered what appears to be an irreversible downward spiral. Critical infrastructure, including oil facilities, factories, and transportation networks, has been damaged or destroyed, creating shortages of basic goods and sending inflation soaring to unprecedented levels. The currency's value has collapsed so dramatically that many Iranians have seen their life savings evaporate overnight, while unemployment continues to rise as businesses shutter their operations. This economic freefall has eroded what remained of the social contract between the government and its citizens. Where once people might have tolerated the regime's restrictions in exchange for stability and basic services, now they face neither ideological satisfaction nor material security. The government's inability to provide reliable electricity, clean water, or even bread in some regions has fundamentally undermined its claims to legitimacy, leaving many citizens to conclude they have nothing left to lose by opposing the regime. The desperation is palpable, with reports of long lines for basic necessities and families struggling to survive in an economy that no longer functions. One of the most revealing indicators of the regime's weakening grip has been its response to mass prison breaks that occurred during recent conflicts. When approximately 1,500 inmates, including many political prisoners, escaped from damaged detention facilities, the government made no serious effort to recapture them. This extraordinary lapse in what is normally one of the most tightly controlled security apparatuses in the world speaks volumes about where the regime's priorities lie. It appears more concerned with self-preservation than maintaining the facade of total control. Historically, when authoritarian governments lose their ability to maintain prison systems, it often serves as a precursor to wider societal collapse. The 1979 revolution that toppled the Shah featured similar breakdowns in penal control, suggesting we may be witnessing the early stages of a comparable unraveling. The regime's security forces seem stretched so thin between external threats and internal dissent that they can no longer perform basic functions of state control. This failure signals a profound weakness, one that emboldens dissenters and undermines the fear that once kept the population in check. The digital revolution has dramatically altered the information landscape in ways that further undermine the regime's stability. Unlike in 1979, when the revolutionary government could control narratives through state-run media, today's Iranians have widespread access to the internet, satellite television, and social media platforms. This connectivity allows citizens to compare their deteriorating living conditions with prosperity elsewhere, to see footage of their leaders' hypocrisy as they live in luxury while preaching austerity, and most importantly, to organize and share information in ways that make mass mobilization possible. The government has attempted to counter this by periodically shutting down internet access during protests, but each crackdown only fuels greater resentment and demonstrates the regime's fear of its own people. Younger Iranians, who constitute a majority of the population, have no living memory of the 1979 revolution's initial promises. They see only its failures and the corruption of its current leadership. This generational divide creates a population increasingly willing to risk confrontation with security forces, as seen in the waves of protests that have grown larger and more defiant in recent years. Social media has amplified these voices, with hashtags and videos spreading faster than the regime can censor them. Historical patterns suggest that authoritarian regimes become most vulnerable when they face simultaneous economic failure, military overextension, and elite fragmentation, three conditions that Iran currently meets in full. The economic collapse has removed any material incentives for popular compliance. The costly foreign adventures have drained resources while yielding no tangible benefits for ordinary citizens. And now even regime loyalists are beginning to publicly question leadership decisions. Similar combinations of factors preceded the fall of numerous dictatorships throughout history, from the Soviet Union to various Arab Spring uprisings. In Iran's case, the potential pathways forward appear limited to a few bleak scenarios: a mass uprising that overthrows the government suddenly and violently, a military coup where the IRGC attempts to salvage the system by removing the clerical leadership, the fragmentation of the country along ethnic lines as central control weakens, or some form of foreign intervention that accelerates the regime's collapse. Each of these possibilities carries its own risks and uncertainties, but all point toward significant instability in Iran's near future. The convergence of these factors creates a perfect storm, making the regime's collapse not just possible, but increasingly plausible. What makes the current moment particularly dangerous is that the regime has systematically eliminated any moderate alternatives to its rule, leaving no clear path for peaceful reform. By crushing opposition movements, jailing reformers, and maintaining an inflexible ideological stance, the government has effectively ensured that any change will likely be revolutionary rather than evolutionary. The widespread anger among ordinary Iranians, combined with the visible weakening of security structures, suggests that the country may be approaching a tipping point where localized protests could rapidly escalate into a nationwide movement. While predicting the exact timing of such events is impossible, the underlying conditions for revolutionary change continue to intensify as the regime's resources and legitimacy drain away. The coming months will reveal whether Iran's government can somehow stabilize the situation, or whether we are witnessing the early stages of its eventual collapse, a process that could reshape not just Iran, but the entire geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. The Islamic Republic appears to be running out of time and options, with its traditional tools of repression and propaganda proving increasingly ineffective against a population that has lost both its fear and its patience. To deepen our understanding, let's consider the human toll of this crisis. Beyond the strategic losses, millions of Iranians are grappling with daily survival. Families are unable to afford basic necessities, and the collapse of infrastructure has left entire communities without power or clean water. The psychological impact is profound. Imagine the despair of watching your life savings vanish while your government fails to deliver even basic services. This isn't just an economic crisis. It's a humanitarian one, pushing people to the brink and fueling their resolve to demand change. The growing protests, often led by women and youth, reflect a population no longer willing to accept the status quo. Another critical factor is the regional fallout. Iran's weakened state affects its allies, like Syria and Hezbollah, who rely on its support. A collapse in Tehran could destabilize these groups, creating a power vacuum that rivals like Saudi Arabia or Turkey might exploit. This could lead to new conflicts or unexpected alliances, reshaping the Middle East's power dynamics. The international community, too, faces a dilemma. Intervene to stabilize Iran and risk empowering its regime, or stand back and watch a nation unravel, potentially triggering broader instability. As we reflect on Iran's trajectory, the lessons are stark. Authoritarian regimes that prioritize control over competence sow the seeds of their own downfall. Iran's story is a cautionary tale of what happens when a government ignores its people's needs while chasing regional dominance. The coming months will be pivotal, not just for Iran, but for the world. In my next video, we'll explore what a post-regime Iran might look like and how global powers might respond. For now, let's hope for a future where Iran's people can reclaim their nation's potential, free from the shadow of oppression.